And we know that there are many kinds of Hispanics, and the life outcomes can differ across these many kinds of Hispanics, whether it's Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans, Cuban Americans, Salvadorians, Haitians, Colombians, and so on and so forth. And some were or some are considered colonized minorities like Mexicans, Americans, and some are considered immigrant minority groups. So the life experience of all these different kinds of Hispanic and Latino groups differ within themselves. And the pace of acculturation, the learning of the language custom of the mainstream society also vary across these Hispanic and Latino groups. And these directly or indirectly affect their life outcomes. And the pace of adopting the language and custom tends to be slower for Hispanics compared to other racial ethnic groups. According to Dr. Healy, maybe Hispanics, unlike other racial ethnic groups, they tend to be more family-oriented. And because of that, maybe it takes them longer to learn the culture and language of the mainstream society, which has nothing to do with their abilities, skills, and other expertise. This could be because they are more family-oriented. So they cling to their culture and values. That's my humble opinion. Don't need to agree with me. And because of that, some of the Hispanic groups, like Mexican Americans, they are excluded from the mainstream society due to their slower pace of acculturation. And they are also affected by the split labor market. And they are also affected by other kinds of institutional racism and discrimination in terms of advancing in the American society. And I don't mean to offend you for saying this, and I apologize for what I'm going to say pretty soon. So I told you, I was a statistician at a consulting firm before returning to academia. And when I was there, what I observed was many colleagues or ex-colleagues of mine are also Hispanics and Latinos from different countries, Mexicans, El Salvador, Brazil, Costa Rica, you name it. And these Hispanics and Latinos that work in that consulting firm, most of them have PhDs mainly in economics and other fields. They are highly educated. But after 5, so the workday ends at 5. Even though some of us, if we had a deadline to meet, we stayed beyond 5. So when I stayed after 5, this was what I observed. If I stayed late in my office, a cleaning company would come to clean the office or the company in general, different places in the company. And the employees of that cleaning company were mainly Latinos and Hispanics as well. So this could be a manifestation of the split labor market within the Latino and Hispanic population. And yeah, They adhere to their values and cultures. They are loyal to their family and kin group. It's a collectivistic culture. The Latino and Hispanic culture tends to be more group-oriented. And some organizations were being formed decades ago, like the League of the United Latin American Citizens, or ILULAC, and the Chicanismo. And Hispanics and Latinos also form unions, like Mr. Chavez, Cesar Chavez. He encouraged migrant workers to form unions. And women were also heavily involved in those organizations. And because of that, my impression is that Hispanics and Latinos were less affected by institutional racism because they organized themselves through different groups. And women may have a higher standing in those groups compared to other racial ethnic groups because they were also involved in the unions and in other groups. And there were many prominent leaders in that population, like Mr. Chavez and Dolores Fernandez. So they were female leaders as well. And even though in one aspect of life, they were less affected by institutional racism, in another aspect, they were affected by foreign direct investment through NAFTA. When foreign investors, mainly due to the period of economic restructuring, owners of factories, when they found that it's too costly to maintain that factory in the US, they moved their factory to other developing and underdeveloped countries, many Asian countries, and many countries in Latin America, Central America, South America, Mexico included. And because these foreign investors, they had more economic resources and financial standing. So they mechanized the agriculture in Mexico. When they invested in agriculture during that time period, and they also implemented free trade, a new way to do business in these countries, which is quite different from how people in those countries conducted their business. So it led to a change in culture and value, whether the natives wanted it or not. And because many of the natives who also own factories, who also own farms, who also own other businesses, they could not compete with these foreign investors. When they use cutting-edge technologies and when they mechanize the agriculture, the locals could not compete with foreign investors. And because of that, some of these locals, they chose to migrate to neighboring countries like the US and Canada. So we see that migration is always a two-way direction in any country. Whether it's between Central and South American countries and the North American countries, or whether it's between Southeast Asia and East Asian countries. The local Southeast Asian business people, business owners in Southeast Asia could not compete with foreign investors from Japan, Taiwan, South Korea. And because of that, it affected their livelihood. And they chose to migrate as laborers back to those countries where foreign investors came from. Migration is always a dual direction. So many of the farmers, they could not afford to invest in machines and other technologies. They were displaced from their land. They could not afford modern fertilizers, modern equipment. They could not afford to be competitive anymore. So they chose to migrate. And Hispanics adhere to a value system, we call that the machismo, which focus on male pride, dominance, and honor and violence. So we see that Hispanics, they fare differently in the US because of their different value and culture. And they migrated to the US because employers were looking for a convenient and easy way to get labors, especially when times were good. So, but Cubans, immigrants were different. We all know that. They were more educated. And especially for those who migrated after Castro came to power, they were from people from the old regime, previous government officers, educated folks, professors who disagreed with communism, they fled. So Cubans were different from other Hispanic groups. So because of that, they were able to preserve their language and culture. They were more able to sustain their culture and value system. And they know different sets of people when they migrated to the US because they were more educated. Maybe some of them brought wealth from Cuba. So they had different social networks. They fare differently. And their ethnic enclaves were different from other racial ethnic groups. Cuban towns were different from the enclaves of other Latinos and Hispanic groups. And Cuban towns maybe were different from Chinatown, Korean towns, or Japanese towns. And because of that, Cubans were able to use their economic advantages to connect with other people who are more similar to them and to acquire different skills, different proclivities, different interests, different hobbies to better assimilate into the mainstream culture. But we know that Cubans who migrated during the 50s were different from Cubans who migrated in recent years or after the 50s. They were different in terms of social economic statuses. And they could be different in terms of education or maybe culture and value system as well. And because of that, they fare differently in the American society. So we see see that institutional racism affected people from different Hispanics from different ethnic groups differently. There are different kinds of Hispanic groups in the US, as shown in the first paragraph. And all these Hispanics, they fared differently in the US. Their value, their belief, their traditions and culture are not entirely the same.